Welcome to the EMN podcast, where philosophy meets disaster and uncomfortable truths meet the profession we call emergency management. This is not safe space thinking. This is the arena. Let's begin. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are in this fine nation. And I have my buddy here with me, as always, Andrew. How are you doing over there in the Jersey side of the world?
I'm doing well, and a good morning to you. We've been hit by a lot of rain lately, and we're getting more rain even as we speak. So I think that they've been gearing up for some potential flash flooding again, flash flooding warnings for certain parts of the tri-state area.
We got floods in the tri-state area. The West Coast is on fire. To the people that are up in Spokane dealing with the issues that are up there, please heed the warnings. To the people that are listening and to the emergency managers that are working it. Hey, we're there with you, and if there's anything that you need, please reach out to your network. We're here for you, and understanding the trials and tribulation that you guys are going through right now. We're with you. Oof, it's a wild natural disaster time here for us for sure.
Yeah, indeed it is. So we're going to kick things off with the 48 Laws of Emergency Management that you've been writing quite diligently over the past many weeks. So, Todd, do you want to start things off with that?
Yeah, I'd start off. So first of all, it's been more than weeks. I just been publishing it over weeks. It's probably been a good year that I've been putting into the 48 laws, and I wasn't sure what to do with it. Right, I was kind of playing. I started off with me just playing around with it. So full disclosure, I read the book of 48 Laws of Power, right? And I'm like,
by Robert Greene.
By Robert Greene. And it's very interesting, the concepts that were there. It's a very if you haven't read the book, read it. I mean, it's one of those things you can just flip through it. It's not one that you just sit down and with a cup of coffee and read for hours. It's just a bunch of small little laws that he created, and he goes a little bit deeper into the history of it. And I'm like, how does this apply to what we do in emergency management and crisis management? And I said, okay, but we do have these unspoken laws that are out there that things happen. And so that's how it started. And then I said, okay, I got to do something with this stuff I've been working on, and put it together in this 12-week series, if you will, for the Substack. So that's where we're at.
Yeah. And I've been reading them here and there over the past couple of weeks, and the one more recent one on sort of politics, policy, and power, which I know as emergency managers, we got into this not for the power and the money and the politics. It's not what we wanted to be doing. And many, folks make the statement, and as you say in the article, sort of keep themselves neutral. They want to be the Switzerland in emergency management. And, I will say, full disclosure, I've actually lived in Switzerland. Switzerland is not entirely neutral in many cases. Let me put it that way. All deference to my Swiss friends. That being said, you have to play the game. And it struck me because I was thinking about early on in my career when I was all of 24 years old. And I had a medical assistance project for refugees and displaced persons in Croatia. So it was a humanitarian program. I was working for Catholic Relief Services at the time. Folks who know me have heard the story a little bit before. We were working for over a year. And then, there was a question about funding and availability. It was a State Department grant. I was told you're not going to get additional money. We had someone visit from the State Department who was interested in visiting a refugee camp that wasn't a camp, it was a refugee displacement from northern Bosnia into Croatia. And it all happened within about a month and a half. And it was a really dangerous situation. The actual location was about 20 miles from us in Zagreb. I was based in Zagreb at the time. But we weren't able to go that 20 miles. We had to travel an hour and a half around to get there. And I volunteered to take him, to go through multiple checkpoints, to sort of go through different front line zones to get there through the mountains. And I took this fellow. I was all of 24. I think he was in his 40s. He was interested in finding out more about the situation on the ground in parts of Bosnia and Herzegovina and Croatia. So it was an opportunity to really talk to him and give him an idea of what we were doing in the program, of what was going on the ground, greater situational awareness. Well, I was doing it because I wanted to basically help the guy, and I needed to go there as well and show him the work that we're doing. There were some questions about whether we should be providing aid to this group. Putting all that aside, it was a 1.5 hour journey that was quite worth it because we really got to develop a relationship. He got a better idea about the program. That was a success because we got additional money for another year beyond that, which was unheard of from the U.S. State Department at the time. And then I reflect to a more recent situation back in about 2015, 2016, funding from the Regional Catastrophic Planning Grant Program from UASI was drying up at the time from throughout the country. It just had run its course over a good, almost, I'd say, 5, 7 to 8 year period. And we were looking for additional funding, and we were trying to partner with other elements. I was working for the City University, helping the city of New York to try to build a long-term program to help sustain emergency management, training and exercises, et cetera, long-term, based on the RCPT work that they had done, not only in New York, but in other parts of the country. And we just weren't successful in doing that. So to a certain degree, that was a failure in terms of the work that I was doing, because I wound up leaving and going on to some other programs and developing and establishing my own practice, which was an opportunity. So, with one door closes, move on to the next thing. So anyway, just a quick reflection on those series of laws that relate to that.
Well, and the best part about that is a series of laws, right? It's not just one law that impacts what you do, and so I kind of put these into pillars,
right?
And so pillar 1 and 2 are the foundation, the mission parameters, and then like managing that first critical hours of an incident. That's like really our action side, and then pillars 3 and 4 is like your long-term mitigation, your training. That's the political navigation, which we were just talking about, and then like the whole community and equity. And I think, this is the way I thought about it. So I don't know, what did you think of like breaking it down into those pillars, and did they make sense? Because like the laws weren't in any necessarily sequential order, right?
Right.
It's just like they kind of put them together in like these pillars.
I saw that. Yeah, I like the groupings. I think they make some sense. I think if you think about them in terms of and contrasting them or referencing, compare and contrast with the laws of power by the 48 laws of power by Robert Greene, I think they make some sense. I did want to ask a first question on this, and that is, you don't call these best practices, you call them laws. Why do you do that?
I think because like everything else, right? Like we have, like when you look at scientific research, right? You got theory, right? And then once theory is proven, it's the law. Like the theory of relativity turns into the law of relativity, right? The theory of gravity turns into the law of gravity once it's proven. And it was a little bit of a step out there, like a little, obviously I'd be a little bit bold on saying that these are already proven, but that was sort of the play on the words that I was using here. Of course, we're using the laws from Greene, 48 laws of power, right? And these tend to be true, right? You just talked about it in your instance that was years ago. These tend to be the truths that happened during for our profession, and that's why I went with instead of best practices, calling them laws.
Yeah, and so which law do people nod along with and then completely fail to do, given your experience? Because I know that when we get together as emergency managers, we will often shake our heads like, oh, yeah, right. It's that sort of thing, right? But we don't, and I don't think it's the right thing to do to point out the failings necessarily of what other folks have done. However, here's the paradox: is we need to learn from them, and hence your laws here, right? So, if you could tell us which one, oftentimes when I see the AARs, it's often communication. but
I mean, it's very much like that, right? I mean, I think when I would like to go through a pillar more than just one particular law, right? Because I think we're looking at like we play the whole community game, and I mean this in without judgment, right? As we talk about a whole community, whole community, whole community,
Mhm.
um, and yet emergency managers tend to stay in their box, in their office, behind the keyboard, because they're busy, whatever the excuse is, right? And again, I'm not throwing rocks because hey, I would be there too. I happen to work for an organization that has additional people that can go out and do community outreach, right? Really involving the community in what you're doing. So right now we're going through our emergency operations plan, rewrite. Um, we're writing it from the ground up. We're not. It's not a make some edits to an old plan. We're creating. We burnt that plan. We said, hey, let's start from the ground, adding some additional things. One of the things that was very important for me was to make sure that we were engaging the community at every step of the way, and having communication and conversation with community members. When we went and doing our community outreach things, like we were doing one tomorrow, um, having those are very important to have those conversations. So, yes, that's what I'm saying. So that's one of the things I think that most emergency managers, where they fail, that pillar of getting into whole community, understanding your community, and going out there and actually talking to the community.
So, can you, risk of it being kind of pedantic here, can you just give us like one example of one unique aspect of that community outreach, how that's done, and then the outcome of that, what that has created within, if you're at liberty to share? It may not be in
Sure.
your own jurisdiction, maybe from one that you've done before.
Yeah, for sure. So access to functional needs. Let's just talk about that really quick.
Hmm.
When it comes to access to functional needs, we say, okay, we're going to have these
Cash.
conversations.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
but we don't bring in people that are in wheelchairs to have a conversation about how do we make this beneficial for them. And then
Hmm.
I'll share a story. It's not my story. If you know Vance,
Oh,
Vance Taylor
sure.
from
I know.
Print,
I know Vance.
so he tells a story about how he's looking at showers at a shelter,
Hmm.
and he gets up there, and there's the doorway has the post to where you just shut the doors,
Hmm.
and the post is not removable, and he couldn't get in because the post is there, right? And they were all proud of themselves, saying, "Hey, we have handicap accessible showers and all this kind of stuff." And he's like, the handicapped people can't get into, the disabled people can't get into the room, right? So that's one of those planning things that somebody did with all great intention, but without having somebody that has to go through that door in a wheelchair to see if they can do it, right?
Right.
Um, simple, easy thing. Invite them to the meeting, right? And I specifically, when we're doing our planning, reach out, especially when it comes to the access to functional needs, reach out to people who have access to functional needs issues, right?
Hmm.
Whether it's they're in a wheelchair or whether they have arthritis and can't walk
Hmm.
upstairs, right?
Hmm.
What happens if the elevator doesn't work, right? What do we do now with somebody who's in a wheelchair or has arthritis and can't traverse the stairs, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
How do we have that? Like, what conversation do we have with them to say, hey, how can we help you? You know,
Yep.
and this comes. So that's an example of like really bringing the community into that conversation. You know, during this process, now we had community outreach meetings where we went to each district and had, I was expecting realistically, I didn't have, a, I wasn't sure how many people would show up to these meetings because I've had community meetings before where it's like me and like two other people, right? And
Hmm.
then one of the persons is like, there's a student who had to be there for a class assignment, right? So, um, so in this case here, we're having, 50, 60 people show
Hmm.
up to have input on what this plan means to them. And one of the things that we're doing differently with our plan here is we're using community lifelines as the basis of our plan, which really like says community lifelines is in it, right? So in the word is like what are these lifelines? How can these people and how do they help when a disaster occurs? So there's ownership back to the community as well for this planning process. So that's why I say like I think that's one thing that we say we do. Um, and if you look at where there's problems after a disaster, where there's lawsuits and stuff like this, why? What is it? What is happening? Where like for instance, and I don't want this, my backyard. I'm not picking on anybody, but there's issues going on with like Altadena and with and Palisades. What's the complaint? It isn't necessarily that the firefighters didn't do their job, right? Because they did. I mean, there was a wind driven, all these other issues, and so they're not feeling heard, right? The community members aren't feeling
Right.
they're part of the solution,
Yep.
and that's time and time. But the books that are written about this, and the press conferences that are happening, and the lawsuits that are happening, all these things, it's about the community not being heard, and so if you start on the basis of that the community is why we're doing these plans, I think it solves the problems going into the future.
I want to change channels a little bit here. When we in our profession, we often think of specific facilities and places, right? The proverbial, spaces, staff, stuff, and systems, and services that we provide. One of those is the Emergency Operations Center, right? The EOC. It's actually in the name of our podcasts that we have out there on the EM network, EOC Voices. So you put, I think, if just sort of the pillar 2, which is EOC is a decision support system. It is not a command post. What's the disconnect there? Because I think a lot of folks think of, oh, it's the command center, it's the command, it is, well, not exactly. As we know, that idea of command and control, it's not really there. I mean, to a degree, some of it, yes, but really it's the coordination, collaboration, cooperation, etc. C3, what I like to call, versus C2, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just speak to that?
Yeah. First, I want to just address this. Randy Collins says it's we need to get community led and government supported, and that's absolutely true, Randy. 100% behind that. So EOC command. So I think it's interesting. This is coming from even like if you think about the military, right? Start there for a second. When you think of overstepping with the generals, right, is when the generals from up high are creating rules that don't necessarily aren't the right information that's on the ground, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this we learned in a terrible way in Vietnam, of having political decisions and tactical decisions being made from the same group of people, right?
Mm-hmm.
From what I understand, the president during the time Johnson was actually had maps laid on the floor, and he was making bombing decisions based upon political decisions, right? Without understanding the tactics or understand the current situation on the ground. So from the Emergency Operations Center, we are there realistically to support. We're supporting the troops, if you will, that are on the ground that have understanding of the situation, right? We're not telling them how to do the fire. We're not telling them what the most important thing is. What we're there is to say, hey, what do you need? How can we get the information? How can we get this for you? What can we take off your plate so you're not dealing with it? So in other words, if they're ordering through the logistics system, additional logistical items, right? We could add whatever we want to add in there. It's taking it off their plate, putting it up into the EOC side of it, so we can deal with the situation up there. And in a good example of this is one of the fires I worked. We were doing evacuation of some care facilities, and they were running out of AED batteries. And I was working medical logistics at the time, and I had to search throughout the estate to find AEDs batteries not AEDs, but it's my mind, defibrillator batteries, monitors, right?
Yeah, we
Not
got
for
it.
not for the AEDs, but for the monitors. So I had to search. We had to go down to San Diego, or somebody from San Diego came up to deliver batteries to us because we found them at one of the manufacturers down there. So, as an example, so we took that off of the field's issues, right? The fields
Right.
had an issue. They recognized, they gave it to us for us to solve, right? We're not solving tactical issues. So there's no control or command, right? Let the tactics be tactics in the field. Do not
Yep.
try to think that you have tactics inside the command post or inside
Yep.
the EOC.
I think that gets to a point that I often express, which is manage at a level that you can reasonably control or manage. You can't control everything, and you can't control things from that kind of distance, right? As you stated, and I in a podcast that I did with Dr. Eric Sailors, which will come out in the next day or so, we talked a little bit about that. Let the folks who are in the field, who are the folks who know the job, know what to do, are good at problem solving and adaptation, to give you present to you the course of action. And if they don't have the course of action, then then you can use the decision-making support that the EOC is intended to provide, right?
Yeah, I'll give you an example of that too. Is we had a bunch of people watching a fire, in the EOC, people who are seasoned fire chiefs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when we're having a discussion about some of the issues that happened at the fire, but none of it was like judgmental of the tactics that were being used. It was like, oh, look at the fire behavior and stuff like that, interesting stuff, and like, kind of discussion on things like this that were kind of broad based, but nobody there was like, oh yeah, those tactics are wrong, or we need to call them up and tell them to do this or whatever, because we're looking at it from a TV screen. We're looking at it from a camera that's in the sky, from drone footage and helicopter footage, right? We're not hearing the information from the fire captains that are running their crews, or from the guys on we don't have any of that real time info, even if we're listening to the radio calls, right? So allowing the people that have the best information to make the decisions is what needs to be done, and it should never be run either from the command post, or from the EOC.
Yeah.
Yes, Randy's correct again.
That's true.
The command process is top down. The control process is bottom up. Absolutely.
One thing that I think seasoned emergency managers realize over, it takes some time, a little bit of time to figure out, right? Because I remember being there in the trenches, so to speak, in my 20s. And this goes to that pillar number 3 that you name in your series there, which is discipline, tempo, sort of learning. The law here, what's that law that you feel that saved you during a long activation?
Oh, man.
I think you just stated it right there.
Yeah, I think that's what it is.
Heavy
The
sigh.
idea here. Say again.
Heavy sigh.
Heavy sigh. Yes. Yeah. What it is you go back to into the pillars again. When you're looking at the I'm sorry, hang on a second. I'm going to pull something up really quick.
I was going to say, Randy seems to be one of our few guests here. We should probably have Randy included here. We should get him on soon.
We should.
Maybe we could record a special edition when we're all in Hawaii.
Yeah. Oh, we definitely should do that. We'll talk about that offline. So bring my pillars back up.
Randy, if you're still listening, let us know.
So
the lines are open for you.
I think the one that I think here it is managing the critical first hours of an incident, right? That right there is going to set the tempo. It's setting the up tempo for what is happening in the command post. Mm-hmm. And now once you set the tempo of what's happening, that's the critical first hours of an incident, right? Understanding that what your up tempo is going to look like, what the battle rhythm becomes. And that's the one thing about the battle rhythm. And I know people hate using the concept of like battle rhythm in military terms, but this is just what we know, right? It's truly like, how do we get things done? How does it become routine inside the EOC, right? And
Mhm.
that's what that manages those first critical hours of incidents. Because if you get it out, if it gets out of control there, you can't get that into the routine. And this is what we all want, right? We all want this to become like the routine activation. We want, okay, here we go. Boom. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. We're going to do this.
Mhm.
Right. And that goes into the mission parameters, right? Keep that within that mission parameters. Understand what those are, and don't let mission creep come in, right? Because once you start letting
Yeah.
mission creep come in, then you lose that, and then those first critical hours are impossible, and getting that up tempo becomes because it becomes impossible. And so that goes back down to the foundation of what we do, and those are the laws that really keep you going for those long terms, because that's just the way it is keeping that, like I said, keeping that up tempo, understand what it is, what the battle rhythm is going to be, and what your mission perimeters are. And
One
Randy says
thing,
input.
of course. So one thing that I learned over time is that sustaining that tempo and
Mhm.
managing that over a long period, that the secondary trauma and that your decision making over time, as you become more fatigued, tired, you start to absorb what's going on. We are working in a high stress environment, right? These are high reliability organizations that we're working with, coordinating with, fire, EMS, law enforcement, sanitation, different partners out there, Red Cross, Salvation Army, many others, Team Rubicon. All of these missions that are out there, public facing, presents a lot of stress. It's a lot of information coming in, critical decisions that need to be made, and sustaining that over time becomes it's that sort of, it's that thing that we ignore sometimes, right? That comes back to bite us in the butt, so to speak. My question to you is, what are some of the things that, based again upon the laws that you put out there, that we can bring to bear here?
Again, I think that the biggest one is understanding your capabilities, and then also where your deficiencies are, right?
Hmm.
Um, and I don't remember which one it is off the top of my head, but that goes into your long term training, and why you do it, right? Why you do the training. Because if you don't understand where your gaps are, you don't understand your weaknesses, and I have a different philosophy of weaknesses too. By the way, I don't think we need to train to your weakness. I think that if you have, Andrew, your strengths are specifically in project management. This is where you're really good at, right? And
Hmm.
I'm picking on you here because you're in the room, right? But if your weakness is public information, right? If you're bad at being a PIO, why in God's name would I take you off of being a project manager and where your strengths are and try to make you a PIO? Not saying you shouldn't have an understanding what PIOs do. Not saying you shouldn't go to the training. That's not my point. But I don't need to make you the best PIO. I need you to understand that your job is to be the best freaking project manager because that's where your strength is, and I'm going to play to your strengths. Now, I have other people who are great PIOs that would be terrible project managers, and the same thing goes along with them, right? Why would I try to take a PIO and make them into a project manager when they're really good at doing the press releases and having those conversations and having those relationship buildings,
Right.
right? So understanding that strength of the individual that you're working with, or even your own strengths,
Hmm.
right? Understand what your strengths are and then working on those. And yes, your weaknesses, I'm not saying that don't work on them, right? I'm saying don't focus on them, right? Don't try to make yourself something you aren't. And I'll go into a football analogy here for a second. You'd never take Josh Allen, who's a great quarterback, right? And say, Josh Allen, your weakness is being defensive linebacker. So I'm going to take you off of quarterback training. I'm going to put you into defensive linebacker training for the rest of the camp. Why in God's name would you do that? You wouldn't do that, right?
Yep.
You would ruin him as his position as quarterback, right? So
Right.
same thing here, right? Think of what your team is, where their strengths are, and make them the best at what they do,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
right?
Yep. Just posting again what Randy had posted there. So he seems to be our support post social media poster there.
It
Poster
says,
poster. No,
I gotta read it because people that are listening to the podcast won't be able to see
that's
it. But it says,
true.
no need to teach a goalie how to dribble or dribble the soccer ball better, right? Training
Yep.
the job that you have. Absolutely. And the good thing is with goalies, they can pick the ball up and chuck it. I learned that, watching the World Cup here. So unless they go outside the box, then they have to kick it. But yes, absolutely correct, right? Let them use their hands because this is what they're good at.
That's right. Absolutely. Since we're almost at time here, I want to bring it back to the folks who are listening, who are, a force of one, so to speak, in their
Mm.
as their emergency management department or unit. They may be a half person or dedicated, multi-hatter who's dedicated part time, or they may have 1 to 2 people. Given that, right, and they have a limited budget at best, what do they do with these 48 laws? What's the best way of approaching it from your point of view?
So, first of all, that's when you have to really take a look at the politics side of things, right? And I don't mean politics in the sense of like left right type paragraph, right? You need to know where you stand in the organization and how you can make your position stronger, and then you need to find out how you can build allies,
Mm-hmm.
right? Build allies. So, I think of an emergency response side of things. We always talk about fire and police; those are easy, right? But on the other side of it too, when it comes to emergency management, right? And the first responders, you should always add in to public works, right? They're going to be one of the organizations that are going to, be out there doing a lot of work, especially during the rainstorms,
Mm-hmm.
as you're talking, right? They're out there unclogging drains and doing all sorts
Yeah.
of stuff during, right? They're just as much a first responder as anybody else when it comes to this. Help them become better, right? And then you have an ally when it comes to with that team that sometimes is forgotten. On the planning side and when you're looking at shelters and things like this, normally, at least most of the organizations I worked in, the parks department, they own buildings, that buildings that you probably want to use, right? Engage with them and get them involved in the planning process and part of what you do. Again, building allies there, not forgetting those people that are working just as hard as everybody else to keep the community. And they also have community programs that they do, and they know the community probably better than most. When you look at the parks department, especially the recreation side of things with their programs, whether it be education programs or train
Yep.
or sports programs, they know who the community is. Um, so it is those organizations that when you're a shop of one, that you need to have allies and people who can support you in other departments. And it doesn't mean that you're not going to do all the hard work, but it means that you're going to have people there that can help you out, and that you're not alone. And that's my suggestion on on the politics side of things.
Mm-hmm. Got
And
it.
it doesn't mean
Got
politics in the sense of being politics, but politics in the sense of knowing who's who in the office who can help you.
it. Yeah. Anyway, so I think we should let the folks know who are listening to this that the compendium of your 48 laws is going to be out soon, correct? Next week?
Next week. Mm-hmm.
Next week. All right. Can you give us a date, or is this still?
No,
still
it's scheduled to go out on Sunday. So
on Sunday. Fantastic.
yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And we, I think because both of us are going to be traveling, and again, surprise, we are going to be in the same location, hopefully on Tuesday evening next week, Hawaii time. And I should note for folks, for Randy who's listening, it is like almost 5:30 in your morning, if I have that correct. Which
Yeah.
we appreciate your being up that early to listen, unless you are in another part of the world, which is always possible as well. But we appreciate that. And is there anything else that we need to finish out with here?
So that being said, let's talk about this real quick. So Monday next week we won't be live on Monday, but we will be live
Yes.
on probably Tuesday. We could do it, and then So hopefully we can get that scheduled. But if not, we might have to miss a week. I have it in my heart of hearts that we'll be able to do something on Tuesday,
Well,
and get it out.
I think if our colleague Randy is up for it, maybe we have a special edition next week with him, live from not live maybe for the Hawaiian Islands, because they're 6 hours behind. So everybody else is going to be that many hours ahead, so to speak. Although it seems to me he gets up pretty early in the morning. So
It's true. It is true.
I mean, I will probably be on his time at that time, because I'll be adjusting to the sleep cycle, so to speak. Okay, so he is on a plane and about to take off. So he's sounds to me, if I were to venture to guess, he is probably somewhere on the mainland. So he's within our time zone, so to speak. We'll not ask him, since he's going to be taking off soon. We won't ask him to reveal his location. So always good. Todd, do you want to finish? You want to close us out for today?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. So just first of all, people are reading it. Add in the comments. I'd like to hear what you have to say about it. This is a conversation starter, and like to hear what you have to say. I think this is just something that we have to do as emergency managers is really take a look at what we do and how it impacts us on a regular basis, because we're supposed to be planners. We're supposed to be, project managers. We're supposed to be people that have the broad brush, we're a generalist, not a specialist necessarily. And these laws help you kind of keep that in mind on how you can do your job on a regular basis. So that was the purpose of it. And I do appreciate everybody who's taking a look at them.
Yeah, no, I think they're definitely worth reading. I also do, as you suggested, recommend reading the 48 Pillars of Power by Robert Greene. And I'm looking forward to seeing the compendium as a whole when it comes out. I'll probably print it out, because that's how I like to read things these days, as opposed to be staring at a screen. So a couple things I just want to mention before we finish. One is, I am first of all looking forward to seeing you in person, because most of our communication is via this format, or text, or an email, or what have you. And then the second thing is, I am going to be delivering the 2-day Project Management for Emergency Managers workshop that is sponsored by the Honolulu City and County Department of Emergency Management. I want to thank you, Randy Collins, as well as John Shear and Nia Gardner, for making this happen. It's also hosted by the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency, also known as HAIMA. And I'm excited that these folks have come together along with Region 9 of International Association of Emergency Managers. And I have my IAEM pin here, and looking forward to delivering that. So looking forward to seeing everyone there. We have, I think, a good crowd. We have
all right. Well, we're losing Andrew here.
Did you lose me?
What a bummer coming at the end. Yeah, we have a lot of stuff that's happening here and going on in Hawaii. I'm looking forward to doing this. Looking forward to working with the IEM Region 9. Oh, Andrew, you're back. We lost you for a second.
Where did you lose me at? Where did I lose?
You were thinking HAIMA, and then that was...
Yeah, so HAIMA and also IEM Region 9. I have my IEM strong pin on for that very reason. And it'll be a wonderful time, and looking forward, if I have the opportunity to ride the waves there in the Hawaiian Islands. I know I have a limited amount of time, but I will see if I can get a surf in honor of my cousin, who is a big surfer in the San Diego area.
So you go out there, you'll be a kook, and get a sponge board and enjoy your time, for sure.
Well, maybe you'll join me.
I haven't been surfing in a few years, but I do. I would love to do it. So I'll have to go out there. I'll ride some waves with you. Get some longboarding in. Yeah. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Until next time, I hope you all stay safe, and as always, stay hydrated.
Okay.
When the sirens scream out loud, we're the voice that breaks the cloud. Heads out high when things go wrong, we'll guide you through with strength and song. Disaster strikes without a sound, chaos reigns but we're around. Public safety in our